That's why, when the Poosbenkum explained, they only mentioned 2015 to 2016. Even though in the Sprindik it was 2015 to 2023, sometimes if you learn from experience, there is no perfect engineering. There are flaws. This is the loophole. The letter mentions earlier 2015 to 2023, but when we met verbally, the BPKB was only asked to check 2015 to 2016. That's when the selective logging issue emerged. So it's no longer an issue, it's a fact. There was selective logging there, so Tom Lembong was indeed targeted to become a suspect. This started with the emergence of footage in all media when Tom Lembong was dressed in prison clothes. They really wanted to portray something that Tom Lembong was evil and dangerous. It turned out to be a character assassination of Tom Lembong.
Wait, can we just pause for a second? So, what exactly is a pretrial? I mean, is it like a warm-up before the actual trial? Because that sounds kind of wild.
Great question. Let's remind everyone what the pretrial is, why it was submitted, when the trial is, when the verdict is, and later I will follow up on more fundamental matters. There are cases of e-plagiarism and so on. Tom Lembong's presence is an honor to be able to sit here.
Oh, e-plagiarism? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Like, what if robots started stealing ideas? But, back to Tom Lembong. What's the deal with this case?
Regarding Tom Lembong's case, we have agreed to file a lawsuit because we have studied a lot. In this process, there are many things that are questionable. The pretrial hearing is an institution that controls the authority of investigators in carrying out the investigation process. Investigators have a lot of authority, including determining people as suspects, detaining people, and arresting. Our law stipulates that investigators must not abuse their power, which is why there is a pretrial hearing institution.
So it's like a safety net for people, right? But what happens if they abuse that power? Do they get a slap on the wrist or something more serious?
Exactly. This pretrial hearing looks at whether the function of this investigation is correct or not. Regarding the matter of being named a suspect, the precedent is the early 2015 ruling. Investigators are required to have at least 2 pieces of evidence in the process of determining a person as a suspect. These 2 pieces of evidence are explained by the Constitutional Court's decision, not just formal evidence, there is material evidence.
Whoa, so it's not just about paperwork. That's kind of like how a magician can't just pull a rabbit out of a hat without some real magic, right? They need to have the tricks down.
Exactly. If people still think the old way, that these courts are just a process, that's not the case. The Constitutional Court explained that investigators may name people as suspects, but they must be absolutely sure there is sufficient initial evidence to determine the suspect, not just formal evidence.
So, if they don't have enough evidence, it's like trying to build a house on quicksand. It's just going to collapse, right? But what about the corruption law? How does that fit in?
Regarding the corruption law, it must be proven regarding state losses. The Constitutional Court's decision emphasized that it has to be actual, not potential. There were many investigation processes that were not yet clear regarding the state's losses, but people had already been made suspects.
Oh, wow. So it's like saying, hey, you might lose money, but we're not sure yet. That's a bit sketchy, don't you think? How can they just jump to conclusions?
From these 2 things, we see that there are problems in the process of making Tom Lembong a suspect, both in the administrative processes and the substance of the minimum 2 pieces of evidence.
So, what happens if they mess up the paperwork? Is it like a game of Jenga where one wrong move could bring the whole thing down?
Exactly. At the time Tom Lembong was named a suspect, he was not accompanied by his own legal counsel. The criminal code states that he has the right to choose his legal advisor. The prosecutor only considers legal counsel as a formality.
Whoa, that's like going into a battle without armor. But what about the timeline? It sounds super confusing.
The administrative issue is related to the Sprindik. The Constitutional Court decision number 130 of 2015 emphasizes that once the Sprindik has been issued, it must be notified to the prospective suspects within 7 days. However, this was not done. He was only informed after being arrested.
Yikes. So they basically dropped the ball on that one? That's like forgetting to send out invitations to a party and then being surprised when no one shows up.
Exactly. The prosecutor's office also seems confused about the timeline of the crime. The examination for the case of alleged corruption in sugar imports was made for the period 2015 to 2018, but the Sprindik was issued for 2015 to 2023.
So, like, they're looking at a whole decade? That's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But, what about Tom Lembong's role in all this?
If they are that smart, it is only natural that they check everyone, not just Tom Lembong. During that period, Tom Lembong was the second minister before Rahmat Gobel.
Right. So it's like checking the whole team instead of just one player. But, what's the main focus of the investigation?
The investigation process should focus on the object of the crime, not the subject. The crime was clear, and the investigation process should have been carried out to find the suspect.
So it's like looking for the root of a problem instead of just treating the symptoms? That makes sense. But, what's the deal with the BPKP?
The Legal Information Center explained that they only said 2015 to 2016, even though the Sprindik was for 2015 to 2023. If you learn from experience, there is no perfect engineering. There are gaps.
Gaps, huh? Like potholes on a road? You gotta watch out for those. But, what about the state losses? That sounds serious.
The BPKP has not calculated the state losses yet. They only made a letter stating 2015 to 2023, but when we met verbally, they were only asked to check 2015 to 2016.
So, like they're just throwing numbers around without any real proof? That's kind of wild. But, what's the public reaction been like?
We heard news of $400 billion in state losses, but that's from the expected profit of the private sector. If it were carried out by a bum, then the profit would belong to the state.
Wow, that's a huge number. It's like saying, hey, we could have made a fortune, but we didn't. But, what's the next step in all this?
The declaration of state losses must be made by the BPK. Up to now, there is none. The audit for 2015 to 2017 has been carried out by the BPK, and there was nothing about state losses.
So, it's like they're trying to find a ghost that doesn't even exist? That's a bit spooky. But, why is this case coming up now after so many years?
After all these years, this incident happened 9 years ago, and now it's suddenly opened as if there are losses.
That's like digging up an old treasure map and finding nothing. But, what do the experts say about Tom Lembong's actions back then?
The experts we present argue that if Tom Lembong had not taken the policy at that time, the country would have suffered a loss of $8 trillion.
Whoa, that's a massive amount. It's like saying if I hadn't done this, we would have been in deep trouble. But, what's the main argument against him?
The issue at that time was that the policy was wrong because of imports when the country was having a surplus. This has been answered by the expert. That is not true.
So, it's like blaming the chef for a bad meal when the ingredients were already spoiled? That's not fair. But, what's the takeaway from all this?
We have to differentiate between just administrative matters and substance. In Tom Lembong's case, the administration is chaotic, and the substance is also chaotic.
Chaotic, huh? That sounds like a reality show waiting to happen. But, what's the importance of this pretrial process?
This pretrial process is important as a momentum to improve our law. It will open the veil on how the correct legal process should be.
So, it's like a wake-up call for the legal system? That's pretty cool. But, what's the role of the trial in all this?
The trial is a control function against the investigator's power so that there is no arbitrariness.
Right. So it's like having a referee in a game to keep things fair. But, what if the law is used as a weapon?
If we use the law as a tool to pressure someone, we must fight this.
That's like using a sword to cut a cake. Totally unnecessary. But how can the public get involved in all this?
The public can judge whether these trials are meaningful to protect human rights interests and uphold justice, or become tools to release criminals.
Wow, that's a heavy responsibility. It's like putting the fate of a whole kingdom in the hands of the people. But what are the demands in this case?
The demands are to declare the determination of the suspect invalid, the illegal detention released, and the investigation process for this case also invalid.
That's a lot to unpack. It's like asking for a whole new game plan. But what's the final message for everyone listening?
Thank you for the public's attention to Tom Lembong's case. This shows that we have a concern for law enforcement.
Totally. It's like saying, hey, we're watching you. But what do you hope for moving forward?
We hope that both investigators and the courts do not need to be afraid in enforcing the law.
Right. It's like saying, stand tall and do your job. But what if they're not sure?
If you are sure you are professional and fair, just carry out the investigation process with a firm attitude.
That's a solid plan. Thanks for breaking all this down. I feel like I just went on a wild legal adventure.